Hey everybody, Jordan here from the Minnesota Discovery Center. Welcome back to the 10th annual, second virtual Iron Range Science and Engineering Festival. This year we're proud to be presenting to more than 1,350 Northland students from more than 13 schools across northern Minnesota. But before we get started with these exciting presentations, we'd like to thank these sponsors. This virtual experience is a partnership presentation brought to you by the Raptor Center at the University of Minnesota. Today we'll be looking at the process of taking in injured raptors and rehabilitating those birds so that they can get back out into the wild. Let's take a look.
Hello, I'm Dr. Dana. I'm the staff veterinarian here at the Raptor Center, and I'm really excited to be here with you today to give you a little behind the scenes look at the Raptor Center Clinic for the Iron Range Science and Engineering Festival. So the Raptor Center treats approximately 1,000 injured or ill wild raptors per year. A raptor is defined as a bird of prey, so that includes hawks, eagles, owls, falcons, and vultures. So those are the species that we treat here. And these birds are generally found by members of the public. So when you're out walking your dog or out at the state park or even just driving from one location to another, you may notice a bird that's behaving not quite right. So it's either not flying away from you or has a wing droop, or maybe it's a baby and it's out of its nest and you aren't sure where its parents are. When you see something like that, members of the public give us a call. And then we assess the situation, decide if the bird needs help, and then it comes to us for care. So either the person who finds the bird is able to contain it and bring it to us, or we send out one of our amazing volunteers to contain the bird safely and transport it to us for care. So when a bird arrives at the Raptor Center, the first thing that happens is it gets a comprehensive medical exam with one of our veterinarians. That exam includes a general physical exam, so what Dr. Rhea is doing here, so doing a physical exam, looking for injuries, palpating the wings for fractures. We take a blood sample that tells us if there's any signs of infection, or we can run tests to look for lead toxicity or organ damage. The other thing we do is we take whole body radiographs, and those let us look for internal injuries that we might not be able to see externally. So internal trauma, wing fractures, leg fractures, things like that. After the bird gets its intake exam, we get them set up in medical care. So that might include wound treatment 2 to 3 times a week. That might include surgery for a fracture, or it might include a splint. Maybe it's a fracture that we want to treat with a splint and it needs splint changes 2 to 3 times per week. So during that time frame where they're undergoing medical care, they're hospitalized here with us in an enclosure. They get medications for pain, for infection. They get fed twice a day. We have 2 full-time veterinary technicians that help get these birds ready to go back to the wild. So for example, if we have a bird that sustained a wing fracture and it had surgery, that can take 6 to 8 weeks to heal. So in that time, it's resting in a small enclosure. It's not going to be in shape anymore after resting for 6 to 8 weeks. So we have to get them back in shape before we release them back to the wild. So what our technicians do is they exercise them. So we exercise them on what's called a creance line. So it's controlled flights so that the bird can build up muscle strength and build up endurance again in a safe manner.
Brought a piece of grass back with him.
The other thing that we do is assess their flight mechanics.
This bird is one of our juvenile bald eagles. She came in late March after she was found down on the ground and unable to fly. And she was actually taken to a veterinary clinic that also does some wildlife rehab on the side. And they were able to take x-rays and do a physical exam and diagnose a right shoulder fracture. And so they elected to send her down to us for continued care, and we did our own workup here and found that she actually had multiple injuries to the right shoulder. There are several different bones in that area, and she had done a bit of damage to each of them. But we tend to do conservative management for those, meaning that instead of surgery, we just put her in a bandage. It's called a body wrap, and it basically just holds this right wing against her body. And so we take that bandage off every few days just to stretch the wing out like I'm doing right now to help maintain mobility of the wing. And she's been here, like I said, for quite a while now, so we're actually going to get some x-rays today to see if she's ready to get that body wrap off.
So she's under general anesthesia while we do this recheck. So that is what the mask is up here. It's an inhaled anesthetic gas. So one of the reasons we do our rechecks with anesthesia is it decreases their stress. So they're wild animals. It's not like your dog or cat that goes to the veterinarian where they're comforted if you talk to them and hold them. These are wild animals and they are stressed by our presence. So we use the general anesthesia to help decrease their stress while they're getting their recheck exams. And the other thing it does is when we're doing the physical therapy, it can be a little bit uncomfortable for them. It's like if you broke your arm and you went to the physical therapist and you were trying to stretch those muscles back out, it's sore initially. So we give them pain medications to help with that, and the anesthesia just makes them not consciously aware of that discomfort, so it also decreases their stress and makes it safer for us, because as you can see, she's a big girl with very strong talons and feet. So we want to look at the end of his toe today, and as you can see, he is a very spunky great horned owl. So he's not going to let us safely get a good look at that bottom of his toe and treat it, so we're going to use anesthesia. Decrease his stress and make it safer for us to get to that wound and treat it appropriately. So all this light pink area was a wound before, that's now healed up.
This whole portion. You can kind of see the swelling of this toe compared to the other ones, but the skin itself has healed up nicely.
So if we go back to that bird that had a wing fracture, we have to make sure that wing can extend all the way and it's able to move and go through the normal range of motion, just like it would if it hadn't been injured in the first place. Our goal is to rehabilitate wildlife for release back into the wild. In order for a raptor to survive in the wild, it needs to be able to fly almost perfectly, if not perfectly. It needs to be able to hunt. And hunting means it needs to be able to see. It needs to be able to fly well. It needs to be able to maneuver. It needs to be able to reproduce. And it also needs to be able to stay out of trouble. So that means it can't be habituated to people. It can't be comfortable around people, because if it's comfortable around people, it's more likely to get injured or get into trouble. So that's something our technicians do, is they assess flight mechanics, behavior. Does this bird have everything it needs to go back into the wild and survive? Once it's ready, it gets another physical exam with our veterinarians. It's our pre-release exam. So we do a complete exam, we take x-rays again, make sure there's not signs of arthritis or other complications developing, and we do blood work again. If all of that's normal, they get a federal band. So it's a metal band that goes on their leg with a unique identification number. And if the bird were to be found again, either it comes into rehabilitation again, or it's caught for a banding project, or in worst case scenario, if it's found passed away, we can get information on what happened to that bird, so we know if what we did was effective, and it also lets us know where the bird goes. So some of our birds are migratory, so we might release them in one location and they're found 300 miles south. So it gives us more information about how they did in their natural history. Once the bird is banded, then we take them back to the location where they were found to release them back into the wild. Oh yeah, so this bird is actually being treated for lead toxicity. So generally we treat when their blood lead level is 20 micrograms per deciliter or above. Any level of lead in the blood is abnormal. You should not have lead in your body, period, for any sort of animal, including us. So this is a problem in people too. Like if you live in a really old farmhouse and you have lead paint and your kiddos are playing and they eat the lead paint, then it causes the same problems in us. She does not want her fluids. So this bird has a blood lead level of 15. So it's a little bit lower, but we are treating it because it shouldn't be in her system, period. So the way we treat it is we give them 2 different medications that bind to the lead. So one of them is called calcium EDTA, and it's included in these fluids that she's getting. And what it does is that calcium EDTA circulates through her blood and into her bones, and it grabs that lead and it sticks to it like a magnet, and then it allows her to excrete it through her kidneys. The other one we give is a by mouth one called DMSA. It does the same thing. It binds it better from the soft tissues. So lead goes in their blood, it goes in their organs, it goes in their bone, it goes everywhere. So it can be really hard to get rid of. And it's a problem in other species too. So it happens a lot in waterfowl. So swans or geese that go to the bottom of lakes and pick up gravel to help them digest their food in their gizzard, they will take up either lead shot from hunting that's ended up in the water or lead sinkers from fishing, and they get lead toxicity, and it can also be fatal for them. At the Wildlife Rehab Center in town, they see lead toxicity in squirrels, in possums, because lead is in more things than you would even realize. It's in like flashing at the top of your ceiling. It's in paint. So at the Raptor Center, our primary mission is to rehabilitate raptors for release back into the wild. Some other things that we do include research and education. So wildlife that comes in for rehabilitation, we can get information from them about what is going on in our environment as a whole. So currently we are participating in some research projects looking at environmental toxins. So something called PFAS, so polyfluorinated chemicals that are from plastics. And we also do research on lead toxicity as well. And this gives us information about the health of our environment as a whole, which is the same environment that we share with these birds, as well as all the other species that are native to the upper Midwest. The other thing we do at the Raptor Center is teaching. So we do environmental education with our education birds to the general public. Down here in the clinic, we also do teaching on the medical care of raptors. So we have veterinary students, graduate veterinarians, and wildlife rehabilitators come spend time with us to learn how to care for these species and provide medical care for them. So I grew up in rural northeastern Iowa, and I always loved animals and the outdoors. So I decided I wanted to be a veterinarian. When I started veterinary school, I didn't really know what role veterinarians could play in wildlife health and ecosystem health. So between my first and second year of veterinary school, I did a summer program and learned all about how veterinarians can work with wildlife, either in captive situations like a zoo, or in wildlife rehabilitation, or more in a research component looking at environmental and wildlife health. After completing that program, then I decided that wildlife rehabilitation was really where my passion was. So after I finished veterinary school, I did some additional training in wildlife rehabilitation and got a research degree, and then I ended up here working with raptors. So at the Raptor Center, our mission is to ensure the health of raptors and the world we share. This work would not be possible without donations from members of the public like you. 100% of the budget for caring for wild raptors that come here from rehabilitation is from donations. And 60% of our overall operating budget is also from donations. We care about wild raptors just like you. We want to get them back into the wild where they belong, but unfortunately they don't pay their medical bills, so we need some help taking care of them. Thanks for joining me today for a tour of the Raptor Center Clinic. I hope you learned something new about what we do for wild raptors.